So GLM 5.2 just dropped, and people already asking if it beats GLM 5.1. What really shocked me, GLM 5.1 scored 95.3 on IMA 2026 from an independent source, and GLM 5.2 launched with 0 published benchmark numbers. GLM 5.2 dropped June 13, 2026, so this is super fresh. I'm running GLM 5.2 against GLM 5.1 across 4 real tests: reasoning accuracy, multilingual support, API latency, and context window size, all sourced from independent data, no vendor spin. Now, if you're paying for API calls at scale, the provider pricing spread on GLM 5.2 goes up to 4.2 times depending on where you run it, and that gap could genuinely change your unit economics. So which model actually wins for your workflow? The answer wasn't what I expected. Okay, so who is this for? If you're a developer or a team picking a model for production right now, GLM 5.1 has a real benchmark trail. GLM 5.2 has a 1 million token context window and a cheaper price floor, and choosing wrong means overpaying or shipping something you can't actually verify works. Test 1, language reasoning accuracy. Ship a model to handle real coding tasks, and it starts hallucinating fixes, or it can't solve the math problem your pipeline depends on. And that's not a vibe issue, that's a production outage. So you need to know a model can actually reason before you trust it with anything serious. I looked at the Deep Infra independent report, and what surprised me is how one-sided this is. GLM 5. One scored 58.4 on S2E Bench Pro and 95.3 on AIME 2026, while GLM 5.2 has no published figure on either benchmark at launch. And community reports say it's solid on structured tasks, but there are 0 numbers to actually compare, which you can see on screen right now. Take this with a grain of salt though, because GLM 5.2 just launched. So the absence of benchmarks doesn't mean it's bad at reasoning. It might be great, and community folks say it handles JSON and function calling reliably. But you can't score what doesn't exist yet, and that's the real issue here, not a capability gap we can actually measure. I was expecting at least some community numbers for GLM 5.2, and what I got was a blank. So GLM 5.1 takes this one by default. It's got actual scores you can point to: 58.4 on SWE Bench Pro, 95.3 on IMA 2026, and that puts it 1-0 on the board. Test 2, multilingual support quality. If your product serves Chinese or East Asian users and the model starts producing garbled output or just defaulting to English mid-conversation, you lose users fast. And with Jipu AI being a Chinese AI lab, this dimension actually carries some weight. What I found is that both models confirm English and Chinese support via vendor docs. GLM 5.2 gets a community nod for being particularly strong in East Asian languages, which is pretty interesting, but there's no controlled multilingual benchmark for either model in the evidence. So on screen, you'll see both sides marked confirmed with no numeric edge either way. Honestly, this one's frustrating because the community reports on GLM 5.2's multilingual strength are promising but really vague, no numbers to hang a decision on, and GLM 5.1 doesn't have equivalent claims published either, so the gap here could be real or could be nothing, and the evidence just doesn't let you tell the difference. I was expecting one of these to pull ahead on multilingual, especially given the lab's background, but this one lands as a tie, both confirmed on English and Chinese, with no benchmark separating them, so the score stays GLM 5.11, GLM 5.20 with one test type. Test 3, API response latency. If you're running an interactive app and your users are staring at a spinner for 4 or 5 seconds before the first word shows up, they're going to bounce, because that initial wait time is what determines whether your app feels alive or feels broken. What surprised me here is the TTFT gap. GLM 5.1's best first token speed clocks at 0.94 seconds at Fireworks and Deep Infra, while GLM 5.2's best is 4.45 seconds at Bastin, which is nearly 5 times slower. And even though these are measured across different provider sets, so it's not a perfect apples to apples, that gap is hard to explain away. So once GLM 5.2 actually starts generating, it's way faster, hitting 578.2 tokens per second at its best provider versus 175.2 for GLM 5.1. So if you're running batch jobs where that initial wait doesn't matter and raw throughput does, GLM 5.2 actually wins that subdimension. And it really depends on your use case. Honestly, I was expecting GLM 5.2 to be competitive on latency since it's the newer model, but 4.45 seconds versus 0.94 seconds to get that first token is a real difference for interactive apps. So GLM 5.1 takes the latency test, and that makes it GLM 5.12, GLM 5.20 with one tie. Test 4, context window size. You've got a giant code base or a 400-page legal document. You try to feed it into the model and it cuts off halfway through. You lose context. The output goes off the rails. And now you're chunking and rerunning, which costs you time and money. So context window size is what determines whether you can even attempt the task. The numbers here are pretty clear on screen. GLM 5.1 runs a 203,000 token context window confirmed across 10 providers by Deep Infra, while GLM 5.2 claims 1 million tokens per block source, which is roughly 5 times larger, and both models share the same 131,072 max output limit. So the advantage is entirely on the input side. Now, the 1 million context figure for GLM 5.2 comes from a blog source, not an independent verification. So take that with a grain of salt. And a huge context window doesn't mean the model actually uses it well throughout. Because long context quality degradation is a real thing. And we don't have data on how GLM 5.2 performs at the far end of that window. GLM 5.2 takes context window size. And honestly, this one wasn't close, because a 1 million token window versus 203,000 is a genuine step change for anyone working with large documents. And that brings the final tally to GLM 5.21 to GLM 5.21 with one tie. So here's where GLM 5.1 clearly beats GLM 5.2. It has real independent benchmark scores at 58.4 on Sawi Bench Pro and 95.3 on IME 2026. Its best first token response clocks at 0.94 seconds, which is nearly 5 times faster than GLM 5.2's best. And if you need a model with a proven paper trail before you ship to production, GLM 5.1 is the only one that has it right now. And here's where GLM 5.2 clearly beats GLM 5.1. The 1 million token context window is a genuine advantage for anyone processing whole code bases or long documents. Its cheapest blended price is 59 cents per million tokens versus 74 cents for GLM 5.1, and it's available across 17 providers. Plus its peak output throughput, it's 578.2 tokens per second, which is way faster once it gets going. Okay, so I was expecting a newer model to at least match the older one on benchmarks. And what I got was a model that launched with none. So here's the decision rule. If you need proven reasoning scores and low latency interactive responses, go GLM 5.1. But if you're processing massive documents and a cheaper price floor matters more than a verified track record, GLM 5.2 is worth a real evaluation.